It started with glitter. Not the metaphorical kind. Either. Real, actual glitter. The sort that clings to your skin, burrows into your carpet, and finds its way into the folds of your life long after it was supposed to be gone. The kind that made its way into our home, on the envelopes of party invitations sent by Caleb DeLuca, the event planner whose name had recently begun to buzz around the neighborhood like perfume on a hot summer evening. Subtle but impossible to ignore. My wife, Ava, was the first to open the envelope. Her fingers dusted with silver specks, she stood in the kitchen under the soft yellow light, reading the elegant gold-lettered card aloud with a touch of amusement. The first annual summer soiree, she read, pausing for effect, hosted and curated by Caleb DeLuca. An evening of fine wine, dancing, and gourmet bites beneath the stars. I remember the slight furrow of her brow, the way her lips curled, not in distaste, but curiosity. This guy is really leaning into the whole Gatsby fantasy. I joked, reaching for a beer from the fridge. What? Does he think this is the Hamptons? She smiled faintly but said nothing, tucking the card into her purse. I think it sounds fun. I should have paid more attention to that purse. It became the resting place of all things Caleb. The soiree was 3 weeks away, scheduled for the last Saturday in June. For those weeks, our lives became a quiet countdown. Ava started talking more about the party as the date crept closer, not excessively, just in passing. She'd mention what dress she might wear, or that Caleb had shared an update in the neighborhood Facebook group. I didn't think much of it. She always loved a good social scene, and she hadn't had many chances to go out since Ethan was born. Our son was 2 now, terrible twos in full swing, with sleepless nights and tantrums over toast that wasn't cut diagonally. The days were long. The years, as they say, were short. But the middle of it? The middle was Ava, the steady center of my universe. And yet, in those weeks before the party, something shifted. Not suddenly, not loudly, but subtly, like a painting being turned ever so slightly on a wall, until you can't quite say what's off, only that something is. She started going for walks after dinner. Walks that took longer and longer. At first, I appreciated the break. Ethan had entered a clingy phase, and I figured she needed time to clear her head. But her eyes seemed elsewhere when she came home. Far away, like she'd left something behind and wasn't sure if she should retrieve it. Then came the shopping trip. I need something new to wear, she said, tossing her keys on the counter. Something a little fun. I looked up from my laptop. Fun how? She shrugged. You'll see. That night, she returned with a black garment bag and a box of new heels. I didn't see the dress until the night of the party. She waited until Ethan was asleep and the babysitter arrived before slipping into it. She emerged from our bedroom with a soft rustle of silk and the unmistakable scent of a new perfume, something floral and sharp, like lilies laced with citrus. The dress clung to her like melted gold, cut low at the back and shorter than anything she'd worn since our honeymoon. She looked breathtaking, dangerous, even. Wow, I managed to say, suddenly aware of how dull my own outfit felt in comparison. You don't think it's too much? She asked, spinning slowly. It's a lot, I admitted. But you look incredible. She smiled, and for a moment, she was the Ava I remembered, the one from our early days, when we lived off takeout and kissed until our lips ached. At the party, Caleb greeted guests like a maestro greeting his orchestra. He was charming, tall, immaculately dressed in a midnight blue suit with no tie, his shirt unbuttoned just enough to suggest a casual rebellion against formality. He was probably in his late 30s, maybe early 40s, but carried himself like a man untouched by time. His hair was a perfectly disheveled mess, the kind you only get by trying very hard not to try at all. When he met Ava, something flickered in his eyes. Not lust, not yet, just recognition, like a painter spotting the right shade of red in a sea of gray. Ava, he said smoothly, offering his hand. I've been looking forward to meeting you. I stood next to her, hand on the small of her back, and he offered me a polite nod. You must be Nathan. Yeah, I said. Thanks for the invite. Of course, he replied, his eyes already drifting back to Ava. Any friend of the neighborhood. The party was beautiful. String lights floated like stars overhead, and a jazz quartet played something slow and sensual in the corner. There were trays of hors d'oeuvres I couldn't pronounce and wine poured from bottles without labels. It all felt curated, like a scene from a movie. and Ava fit into it like she was born for the frame. I lost track of her sometime after midnight. It was innocent at first. People mingled, danced, laughed too loudly. But when I realized I hadn't seen her in over 20 minutes, something knotted in my gut. I checked the patio, the bar, the little garden path Caleb had lined with flickering lanterns. Nothing. Then I found the guest house. It was tucked behind a row of hedges, its windows aglow with warm light. The door was slightly ajar. I didn't knock. Inside, I found them, standing close, too close, like actors in the moment before a kiss. Ava's hand rested lightly on his chest, and his fingers brushed a strand of hair from her face. They weren't kissing. Not yet. But they were breathing the same air, tasting it together. Neither of them noticed me. I backed away before they could. The walk home was only 4 blocks, but it felt like miles. I didn't run, didn't rage. I walked slowly, quietly. Let the night wrap around me like fog. My hands were shaking. Ava came home 2 hours later. She slipped into bed without a word. I lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling, counting the breaths between us. 1, 2, 3. The next morning, she was all smiles. Asked if I wanted pancakes. Kissed me on the cheek. I nodded and said nothing. But something inside me had cracked. A hairline fracture in the foundation. And I knew it would only spread. 2 days after the party, Ava asked if I'd noticed how beautiful the lighting was that night. She stood in the kitchen, slicing strawberries for Ethan's breakfast, her hair tied loosely in a bun that framed her face in soft, deflective shadows. I stood across from her, nursing a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. I don't know what Caleb used, she mused, but the light looked like candlelight, even though it wasn't. Just so warm. Didn't it feel like a dream? Her voice was casual, but I could hear the hope in it, the unspoken plea for me to agree, to validate the memory, to share it with her. I wanted to tell her it had felt like a dream, a fever dream, the kind that wakes you in the middle of the night with your heart pounding and the sheets soaked through. Instead, I said nothing. I just watched her fingers move through the fruit, like she was sculpting something fragile, trying to shape it into beauty. I had always known that Ava had a flair for the aesthetic. Even in our early days, she curated our lives like they were meant to be captured on camera. Matching throw pillows, a perfectly lit bookshelf, curated photo walls with quotes in cursive. But lately, she'd started curating herself, carefully choosing which pieces of her I was allowed to see. The dress from the party reappeared later that week, freshly dry-cleaned and hung on the back of our closet door. I asked her why it was there. She blinked. Oh, just needed more room in the guest closet. Caleb said he knew a designer who could tailor it better next time. Next time? I nodded slowly and walked away. In the weeks that followed, I kept my observations to myself. I became a silent collector of inconsistencies. She had new music on her playlists, dreamy, low-tempo indie tracks with lyrics about forbidden touches and slow burns. I found a text notification from CD that she quickly dismissed as work stuff. She suddenly started going to yoga again, despite never really enjoying it. Every lie was paper-thin, barely stretched across the truth. But Ava had always been good at trusting an appearance. If it looked like a marriage, then surely it still was one. If I tucked Ethan in at night, took out the trash, and paid the bills, I was still her husband, just not the version of me she spoke to Caleb about, I suppose. The nights grew colder, not just seasonally, but in bed. She used to curl into me, tuck her feet between my calves, mumble something half asleep. Now, she turned the other way, and her side of the bed became its own country. I'd wake to find her already downstairs, sipping coffee, scrolling on her phone with her back to the window. I should have confronted her. Should have said what I saw in the guest house. But I didn't. I told myself it was because I needed proof, concrete, undeniable. But the truth was simpler. I wasn't ready to watch the world I built collapse. Then, late one night, I made the mistake of checking her laptop. It was left open on the dining table, glowing in the dark like an invitation. I hesitated, told myself to walk away. I didn't. Her email was open. Not a secret one, just her regular Gmail. There weren't many messages, nothing scandalous. But there, buried between a Target promotion and a PDA reminder, was one labeled last Saturday. The sender, Caleb DeLuca. I clicked. Still thinking about it, it began. Still thinking about you. In that dress, the way you looked at me before he came back. I meant what I said. You deserve to be seen. Beneath it, her reply. Shorter, more cautious. You know how complicated this is. Please don't text me during the day. I'll let you know when I can talk. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a long time. The screen burned into my mind like an afterimage. The next morning, I made Ava her favorite coffee, dark roast, a splash of almond milk, 2 sugars, and brought it to her in bed. She looked surprised. Thanks, she said, blinking. What's the occasion? Just felt like being nice, I said, setting it on her nightstand. I watched her take a sip, her lips brushing the rim, her eyes avoiding mine. We didn't speak of it again. That was the thing about Ava. She didn't lie boldly. She lied softly, with omission, with silence, with redirection. Like that Friday night. She said she was going out for dinner with coworkers, celebrating someone's promotion. Left in a fitted black jumpsuit and a swipe of red lipstick I hadn't seen in over a year. She kissed Ethan on the forehead and me on the cheek, then disappeared into the night like a woman walking into a different life. I waited 30 minutes, then followed. It didn't take much. I knew Caleb's address from the party. He had a new car in the driveway, a silver Jaguar, and a new potted plant near the door that Ava would have approved of. I parked down the street and waited. Her car showed up at 8:42 p.m. She wore the same jumpsuit. She didn't knock. The door opened before she reached it, and Caleb stood there with a smile that could melt gold. He didn't kiss her, not on the lips, not right away, but his hand found her waist like it belonged there. She stepped inside without looking back. The porch light flicked off. I sat there until midnight, staring at the empty doorway. I thought about going home, packing a bag, driving somewhere. But instead, I returned to a dark house, kissed my son goodnight, and lay in bed awake until dawn, listening to the silence. 3 days later, the second invitation arrived. Another envelope, this time sealed with bronze wax instead of glitter. Elegant calligraphy. Inside was a card announcing a private dinner party at Caleb's residence, an intimate evening for a select few. Ava's name was on the guest list, not mine. She left the card on the entry table like it meant nothing. I stared at it for a long time, running my finger over the wax seal, feeling the edges of something I couldn't yet define. That evening, I told Ava I'd be out late with a client. A lie like hers. We passed each other in the kitchen, 2 ghosts in familiar skin. At 6:40, she left, dressed in white this time. A soft, fluttering thing that bared her shoulders and revealed a delicate tattoo I never knew she had. Just below her right collarbone, a small crescent moon. It glowed in the light. At 6:51, I followed. But I didn't go to Caleb's. I went to her sister's house. Jenna had always been the more grounded one, the one who told me, gently, a year into our marriage, that Ava needed more than most people, that she grew bored easily, that she loved to be adored, needed it like air. She's fire, Jenna once told me. Beautiful, mesmerizing. But fire doesn't settle, Nathan. It moves. It consumes. I knocked on her door, and when she opened it, her face changed. You know, don't you? She said softly. I need to know everything, I whispered. Jenna hesitated, glanced behind her, then stepped aside. Come in. Jenna's living room smelled like eucalyptus and old books. She led me to the couch, the same one Ava and I had lounged on during holidays past, when Ethan was just a baby and the world still felt intact. There was a low hum from the air purifier in the corner and a faint ticking from a wall clock that suddenly felt too loud. Time, announcing itself like a judge. Tea, she offered. I shook my head. We sat in silence until Jenna exhaled, deep and slow, as if letting something long buried come to the surface. She told me, she said quietly. About Caleb. About all of it. How long? Jenna bit her bottom lip. A few weeks. Maybe more. She didn't give me a timeline. My mouth went dry. Why didn't you tell me? Because it wasn't mine to tell, she said. And because I wasn't sure she was actually going through with it. I thought maybe it was a crush. A fantasy. You two had been. Strained. I figured it would pass. Strained. Such a neat word for unraveling. She said she felt like you didn't see her anymore, Jenna went on. That you were a great father, but not a husband. Not in the way she needed. I wanted to laugh. Or cry. Or maybe just scream into a pillow until my throat went raw. Instead, I stared at the floor and said nothing. She said Caleb made her feel. Jenna hesitated, searching for the right word. Electric. I nearly flinched. Do you know what it's like? I said finally, my voice brittle. To see someone's eyes light up and realize you're not the one standing in front of them? Jenna looked away. Her silence was confirmation enough. I stood. The tea table between us felt like a chasm. I needed to hear it out loud, I said, reaching for my keys. Now I have. Jenna stood too, stepping forward. Nathan, she's lost. She thinks this is what she wants, but she doesn't see what she's doing. She's chasing something that looks like freedom but feels like fire. Then maybe she deserves to get burned. Her eyes softened. And what do you deserve? I didn't have an answer. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove. No destination, just movement. Through side streets and long stretches of highway, past glowing gas stations and darkened strip malls. My phone buzzed 3 times. Once from Ava, once from an unknown number, and once from Ethan's babysitter, who I'd forgotten to update. I texted the sitter back. Ava will be home soon. Thanks for staying. She replied with a heart emoji. I turned my phone off after that. Sometime past midnight, I ended up at the cliffs outside town. The ones overlooking the lake, where we'd taken engagement photos once, laughing into the wind. That day had been overcast, and Ava kept brushing her hair out of her face, frustrated but glowing. She had kissed me without warning then, and the photographer had caught it, the perfect moment. That photo still hung in our hallway. I sat on the hood of my car and stared out at the black water, moonlight dappling the surface like scattered secrets. The wind was sharp, cold, honest. Somewhere below, a boat's engine hummed, then faded. I thought of Ethan, of his small hand in mine, of the way he whispered "Daddy" when he was half asleep, as if checking to make sure I was still real. And I thought of Ava's eyes, wide and reckless in the glow of Caleb's porch light. The next morning, I returned home to find her in the kitchen. She was barefoot, in a robe, holding a mug she didn't sip from. Her eyes were tired, not mascara-smudged or red-rimmed, just blank, like someone who'd been staring into a mirror too long. "Where were you?" she asked. "Out." "With who?" "No one." She set the mug down with a soft clink. "You didn't answer your phone. You didn't ask me to." She nodded slowly, lips tightening. "I guess we're doing this." I walked past her to the living room, dropping my keys on the table. Ava followed. "Nathan, Don't," I said, not turning around. "Don't say you're sorry. Don't say it didn't mean anything. And don't lie." She stopped walking. I turned to face her. "Tell me what you're doing with him." Her breath caught. Just a flicker, but I saw it. "I don't know," she said. I laughed bitterly. "That's rich." "I didn't plan for any of this," she said, voice soft. "It just happened. You don't trip and fall into a man's bed, Ava. It's not like that." "Then what is it?" She looked down, silent. Her fingers twisted the sash of her robe like it could save her. "Is it still happening?" I asked. She didn't answer. "I saw you," I said. "At his house. Friday night." Ava looked up, startled. "You were there?" "Parked down the street. Watching you walk inside without a glance back." Her face crumpled then, not quite crying, not yet. But the edges of her mask cracked. "You weren't supposed to see that," she whispered. "No," I said, stepping closer. "But I did. And now you have a choice." She straightened slightly, bracing herself. "I want the truth," I said. "The whole of it. All of it. No editing. No poetry. Just raw, ugly honesty." Her lips parted, then closed again. She nodded. "I didn't mean to fall for him," she said finally. "But he listened. He looked at me like I was magic. Like I mattered. And somewhere along the line, I started believing him." I said nothing. "I didn't sleep with him that first night," she added quickly, "but it happened. Eventually." I clenched my jaw. "I know that makes me a terrible person. It makes you selfish," I said. "And cowardly. But not terrible. Not yet." We stood there in silence. "I want to fix this," she said. I raised an eyebrow. "Do you?" Her voice trembled. "I miss you." "You don't miss me," I said. "You miss the version of yourself who still loved me." She flinched. "But here's the thing," I continued. "That version can still exist. But only if you kill the one standing in front of me." "What do you mean?" "I mean you need to choose. Right now. Him or me. No games. No slow transitions. Burn one bridge and walk away from the ashes." Tears welled in her eyes. "You can't just." "I can," I interrupted. "And I am." Ava stared at me like she didn't recognize who I was. And maybe she didn't. Because in that moment, I wasn't just her husband. I was the man she betrayed. The The one who stood quietly at the edge of her fantasies and decided he wasn't content to be scenery anymore. I need time, she whispered. You have none. I can't just. Then you already made your choice. She gasped. Nathan, please. I stepped past her and walked upstairs. Packed a duffel bag. Grabbed Ethan's favorite stuffed lion. I wasn't taking him away, at least, not yet, but I wanted him to know I'd been thinking of him. When I returned downstairs, Ava was still rooted in place, eyes red, lips trembling. Where are you going? She asked. Somewhere honest. I walked out without another word. I moved into a short-term rental that week. Just a small townhouse across town, with beige walls and no memories. Ethan visited every other night. I kept his lion on his pillow and told him bedtime stories that didn't end in heartbreak. Ava called, texted, sent long emails full of half apologies and poetic metaphors. I didn't respond. Then, one night, a knock at the door. When I opened it, she stood there in the rain, soaked and shaking, holding a letter. Read it, she said. Please. I took it. Before I could speak, she turned and walked away. The envelope was pale gray, thicker than standard stationery, sealed with wax. Ava had pressed it into my hand in silence, her eyes red and her dress clinging wet to her skin from the rain. I hadn't asked her to come. I hadn't said a word when she turned away down the steps, her heels echoing hollowly against the sidewalk as if each footfall carried a piece of our past away with it. I waited until the door was closed, until Ethan was asleep, until the wineglass beside me was half empty and the silence had settled back around me like dust on forgotten furniture. Then I opened it. The letter was handwritten, her script careful, like she'd tried to hold herself steady as she wrote. No perfume, no flourishes, just black ink and emotion pressed into paper. Nathan, I have rewritten this a dozen times. Maybe more. Each draft sounded like an apology, or a justification, or worse, an excuse. This will be none of those. I cheated on you. That is a truth I can no longer frame in soft light or blurry details. I let someone into a part of me that was always supposed to be yours. And when I crossed that line, I told myself it was only a step, harmless, temporary. But I know now it was a cliff, and I jumped. You asked me to choose. You were right to. And I have. I ended it with Caleb. He offered escape. You offered history. He made me feel admired. But you made me feel known. And when I stood at the edge, wondering which way to fall, I realized something terrifying. Caleb made me forget myself. You remind me who I am. I'm not asking you to forgive me now. I don't expect the pieces of us to fit together just because I finally decided to stop running. But if there's a corner of you, just one, that still believes in the version of us that laughed over midnight pizza, held hands in hospital waiting rooms, and danced barefoot in the kitchen, then I'm still here. Broken, but here. Ava. I set the letter down gently, like it might crumble under the weight of the room. The next morning, I dropped Ethan off at preschool and drove. Not to her. To Caleb. His home was just as I remembered it, curated to perfection, the kind of place that looks like it never gets lived in. Even his porch plants stood obediently upright, watered and bright. I rang the bell. He answered with that same smooth composure, as if he'd been expecting me. Nathan, he said. I figured you'd show up eventually. I didn't respond. He gestured to the small patio. Coffee? No. He nodded, motioning for me to follow him inside. I didn't. My feet stayed on the welcome mat like roots. She ended it with you. He blinked. That smile, trained and practiced, didn't falter, but the edges of it grew brittle. She said you made her feel seen. I added. But you didn't. You made her feel wanted. There's a difference. One is about her. The other is about you. Caleb crossed his arms. I'm not going to apologize for. I didn't ask you to. We stood in silence. Two men who'd shared the same woman, in different ways. I'm not here to fight you, I said finally. I came to thank you. His eyebrows lifted. You showed me how fragile love can be. How easy it is to ignore the small fractures until they become fault lines. Ava and I were drifting long before you entered the picture. You weren't the cause. You were the reveal. He looked confused, maybe annoyed. I didn't care. Don't call her. Don't email her. Let her remember what it feels like to be whole. And with that, I turned and walked away. When I got home, Ava was waiting. Not inside. Not at the table. She was outside, on the curb, holding a paper bag of groceries and a stack of folded toddler clothes. She looked up as I pulled into the driveway. Her lips parted like she'd rehearsed something but forgot the lines. I didn't know if you'd want to see me. I got out of the car. Ethan's jacket was in the laundry, she added. And he left his stuff lying here. I have it, I said. It's in his room. She smiled softly, then let it fade. I read the letter. I told her. She nodded. Waited. I believe you. A breath escaped her, something between a gasp and a sigh. But belief isn't forgiveness. I know. And forgiveness isn't trust. I know that too. But I'm willing to start over. She blinked. Really? With one condition. She stiffened. No more parties, I said. She laughed. A broken, relieved sound. Deal. We didn't move back in together right away. We dated, awkwardly, cautiously, had coffee in places where no one knew us, held hands on walks after dark, went to therapy, even when we didn't want to, especially when we didn't want to. We talked more in those months than we had in the last year of our marriage. About everything. Not just about Caleb, or betrayal, or guilt, but about how lonely it had gotten in the space between us. About how easy it is to forget to be each other's witness. About how love can survive a fire, but only if both people are willing to rebuild from the ashes. Ethan adjusted quickly. Children are resilient like that. To him, Mommy and Daddy were just sometimes together and sometimes not. He loved us in both states, without condition. By fall, Ava moved back in. Not as a final answer, but as a question we were willing to explore again. We went back to the lake once. Those same cliffs where I'd stood alone months before. It was early October, the leaves just beginning to curl, the wind carrying a quiet bite. She stood beside me, arms wrapped around herself, her gaze scanning the horizon. I don't expect things to ever be what they were, she said softly. I nodded. I'm not trying to erase what I did. You couldn't, even if you wanted to. But I can still love you, she said, even if I failed at it before. I turned to her. And I can still love you, even if it's different now. She reached for my hand, her fingers cold but steady. We stood like that for a long time. Not healed, but healing. Together. I still think about the party sometimes. The string lights. The jazz music. The hum of people pretending everything was perfect. I remember the way Ava looked that night, radiant, unreachable. And I remember how easy it was to lose someone in a room full of light. But I also remember what followed. The pain, the silence, the letters, the choice. And somehow, I'm grateful. Not for the betrayal, but for the reckoning. Because sometimes love needs to be broken to remember how much it matters. Sometimes, fire doesn't destroy, it clarifies. And when the smoke clears, if you're lucky, you find someone still standing beside you. Not because they stayed, but because they left and chose to return.